Okay. Right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Freedom of the Press Awards. My name's Isabel Reynolds. I'm a reporter with Bloomberg News in Tokyo, as well as the current president of the FCCJ. I'd like to welcome you all to this evening's Freedom of the Press Awards. With me, mostly online, are Justin McCurry of The Guardian and Simon Denyer of The Washington Post, who are the co-chairs of our Freedom of the Press Committee, as well as freelancer Ilgin Yorulmaz, who is the board liaison for the committee and also joins us remotely from Turkey. Before we start talking about this year's winners, I'd like to say a few words about the club itself and the awards. The FCCJ, as you know, is 76 years old and traces its history back to journalists who were struggling to cover Japan in the early years of the US occupation after World War II, and they literally had nowhere to stay. While we no longer provide accommodation for our members, we do provide a fascinating array of press conferences that give insights into all aspects of the news in Japan and beyond, as well as a number of other services such as working space, research services, and a library. But among all these functions, I think that championing the freedom of the press, including through these awards, is one of the most important things we do. And sadly, the need for voices to speak up for the freedom of the media is only growing as time passes. Look, for example, at Hong Kong, where Apple Daily was only last week forced to close after 26 years, following the detention of the chief editor and 5 other executives, and the freezing of his assets. Look at Beijing, where a number of journalists have been detained for reasons that are unclear, including my Bloomberg colleague, Hayes Fang. Myanmar, of course, is another source of concern, as indeed is Malaysia, and the list goes on. But there are less obvious examples. We should also be worried about the disappearance of the local media, for example, in many parts of the United States, which leaves some areas without a watchdog to keep an eye on the activities of local politicians. And according to the Press Freedom Tracker, 153 journalists were detained or arrested while covering protests in the US in the year to May this year. Of course, life is far from perfect for the media in Japan, which ranks 67th out of 180 countries in the Reporters Without Frontiers Press Freedom Index for 2021. But we can, at least so far, speak out without fear of being imprisoned. And that's why it's important for us to use our relatively secure platform to talk about the injustices facing journalists in many countries and to recognize the great work being done by courageous reporters, both overseas and in Japan. Thank you very much. I'll now hand over to Simon Denyer for the first award.
Thanks very much, Isabel. Unfortunately, we had the first award is for the freedom of the press for Asia. And unfortunately, we had a number of strong candidates for this award. And I say unfortunately, because as Isabel said, it's been another grim year for press freedom in Asia, and another year where journalists all around our region have had to stand up and take great personal risk to fight for freedom and to fight for freedom of expression. You know, I wanted to mention, Isabel's mentioned many important places, China and Hong Kong among them. I wanted to mention a couple more. You know, we think of India as being a democracy, but last year 4 journalists were killed in India. It's often journalists in the towns and cities around India who face the greatest risk, rather than the national journalists we know, but the local journalists, from a nexus of criminality, crime, and corrupt politicians. I wanted to mention Vietnam as well. Several members of the Independent Journalists Association of Vietnam were arrested and sentenced to between 11 and 15 years in prison in the last few months. Award-winning journalist Pham Duan Trang is detained and has no access to her family or to lawyers. She's facing a lengthy prison sentence. And I heard just a few hours ago that another blogger, leading blogger, Le Dung Vova, was also arrested yesterday. It's a grim situation in Vietnam, and the journalists there know exactly the risks that they've been taking and are suffering the consequences as a result. And of course, we have to mention Maria Ressa in the Philippines, who's been a guest at the FCCJ, faces 9 open charges against her, and if those charges are upheld, could face a lifetime in prison. So a grim situation. Those are some of the people we considered. We've decided to give the award to the brave journalists of Myanmar who have faced a brutal wave of repression since the February the 1st military coup. 900 civilians in Myanmar are believed to have been killed. Thousands of people have been detained, although some were reportedly released this week. But at the front line have been Myanmar's media organizations, at least 7 of which have seen their licenses withdrawn, their offices raided. Journalists have been beaten, they've been shot by live bullets, they've been arbitrarily arrested, and in detention there have been several and consistent reports of torture, of beating, and so on. So they have faced really severe consequences for doing their job. I remember going to Myanmar in 2013 and seeing the kind of glorious explosion of freedom of expression that was happening after democracy was restored. And there's been a great flowering of journalism in Myanmar in the last few years, and the military clearly was determined to clamp down on that. When journalists were arrested, citizen journalists came up in their place to record with video the demonstrations that were taking place and have been brave in their own way at getting the message across. Even being detained with videos on your phone risks arrest and detention by the authorities in Myanmar. Some journalists remain in hiding with arrest warrants against their names. Many have fled the country to Myanmar's neighboring countries. They continue to operate and get the news out, often for little or no pay, in order to keep a window open to what's happening in that country. I'm pleased to say that our sister organization, the FCC in Thailand, launched an appeal for equipment and for funds to support journalists in Myanmar. And I'm very pleased to say that some of our own members contributed to that appeal. So anybody who is interested, there are details on our website and indeed on the FCC Thailand's website. I won't go on because I could mention many people. I should mention Danny Fenster, the American journalist, managing editor for Frontier Myanmar, who was arrested at Yangon International Airport on his way back to Michigan, and he's still behind bars. But we wanted to celebrate the journalists of Myanmar today. We wanted to celebrate their courage, the journalists and the citizen journalists, their commitment to getting the story out, their determination to risk their own lives. Without their work, we'd have little or no idea what's happening in Myanmar. And that's why we've decided to award the FCC Asia Press Freedom Award to all of the journalists of Myanmar. I'm very pleased to say that, that accepting the award on behalf of all of those journalists is Sway Win, who's the editor-in-chief of one of the leading organizations there for free media, Myanmar Now. Sway Win, thank you very much for joining us. Maybe you could say a few words. Very, very happy to give you the award on behalf of all of the journalists of Myanmar.
Thank you very much, Simon. I'm very honored on behalf of all our colleagues in Myanmar to be recognized like this. We have been in great mental and physical disarray since the coup. We grew up with the military dictatorship. We never tasted freedom and democracy in our life. So myself, I I was a former political prisoner. I was not just an activist, you know. Many people actually, thousands of people were routinely jailed actually during the case of the military rule. So at the age of 20, when I was a university student, I was sentenced to 21 years for distributing anti-government pamphlets and for participating in a small protest. I was sentenced to 21 years. I served seven years in jail in total from 1998 to 2005. We saw a lot of harshness, a lot of human suffering. So, but we came out without a trace of revenge, actually, you know. We just wanted to see our country going in the right direction with a sense of forgiveness, reconciliation, and peace, you know. So the country opened it in 2010 in a very abnormal way. There was a political transition orchestrated by the military junta, designed by another constitution written by the military. We were very at ease, actually, you know, very uncomfortable about the whole political process. You know, the military regime wanted to transition our country, you know, to a country like, I think, Singapore, or I don't know, actually, to China, actually, you know, where you get a bit of material, you know, material improvement, you know, and then you get a bit of opportunity to speak out, but stay. This is what you call benevolent dictatorship, actually, you know. So that was the intention, but the military soon realized we will not be just satisfied with all this material stuff. We will not just be satisfied with the mobile phones and condominiums and holiday trips to Bangkok or Bali. We will not be satisfied, you know? So our country is more complex. The political system must need to be changed, actually, overhaul. Otherwise, you know, we will be stay trapped in this protracted, you know, protracted military dictatorship, actually. So people never stop calling for greater democratic rights. We never stop. But sometimes people in the outside world are under the illusion or impression that Burmese people do not realize that it would take hundreds of years for a country like the United States to establish democracy. We understand. We are not calling things to change overnight. We want to be on the right track, no matter how gradual the process is. So things did not start out from the very beginning. I believe that the military coup was very much premeditated, planned like since 2015. So there was a very well premeditated coup. The military decided that they will start this process. They now want to go back, you know, to the previous military rule. Now, actually, currently our situation is like we are on the verge of becoming another North Korea, right in the middle of Southeast Asia. So that's the situation. So regarding journalism, many journalists keep working in our country. Some of the journalists were released yesterday, but this is all part of the, you know, usual psychological warfare. You know, they will make mass arrests and they will release, actually, you know, many people who are not deemed, you know, as real threats, actually. They were taking the people hostage, actually, you know. So they will exercise this pressure on and off on the society, on the society. That was part of the game. That was part of during 7 years in prison, I saw many people released, but at the same time, I saw many people were being detained and sentenced in the mock trials, in the trials set up within the same prison compound where we are cut, actually, So all the court proceedings are now taking place inside all the prisons. The judiciary has been completely destroyed, put aside. So yeah, for the media, actually, we still working. Some of the many journalists are still behind bars. One of the journalists who was released a few weeks ago, he said one of his colleagues, he was he was forced to undress completely naked, and then the military intelligence threatened that they will rape him. He was asked to kneel down completely naked on the ice stone, actually, for hours. So something like that, actually. Our reporter who was released from prison yesterday, she saw a number of individuals who were brutally tortured, who had ribs broken. There are many young girls, there are many old women. This is the worst kind of military rule we have ever seen. The junta has been arresting immediate family members of activists. If they cannot arrest me, they will take all the immediate family members, parents, and childs, etc. Yesterday, one of the political detainees who was released was just 5 years old. 5 years old. 5 years old. So she was released, actually. So something like that. So yeah, just to conclude, yeah, we are very grateful to this, to everyone who organized this event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Swaywen. We actually have a crystal trophy here for the Myanmar journalists. Obviously, we can't hand it to you. Perhaps we can just show it. We'll be displaying it in the club, and perhaps one day you'll be able to come and pick it up on behalf of the journalist community in Myanmar. We're just bringing it over now. I wonder if you can get a good shot of that. Oh, it's okay.
I can see it. Yeah, I can see
You can
it.
see it. Okay, that will be on display in the club from today.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us. Right. I'd like to move on to the next award, which is for Japan, and we'll have a presentation by Justin McCurry, please.
Thanks very much, Isabel. I'm Justin McCurry, and I co-chair the FCCJ Freedom of the Press Committee with Simon Denyer. I'm sorry that I can't be there in person, but I'm really delighted to be able to join you for the Freedom of the Press Awards. After a year in which we've given our support to journalists in, as Isabel mentioned, Beijing, and of course Myanmar, and in other parts of the world, the committee felt it was important to recognise the work of journalists in Japan, journalists who've demonstrated a commitment to the values of journalistic freedom. While they're not being detained or shot dead on the streets, reporters here do face other less visible obstacles. A state secrets law that's designed to deter collaboration between reporters and whistleblowers. The loss of access to official information via the press clubs for errant reporters, and the age-old problems of self-censoring and avoiding taboo subjects. I think you only have to look at the recent coverage of the Olympics and the vaccination rollout to get an idea of the reluctance among some mainstream newspapers and broadcasters in Japan, and of course with a few notable exceptions, to offer any real meaningful critique of the official narrative. So after we received nominations for the Japan Award, it was clear that 3 organizations and individuals had really caught the attention of the FCCJ membership. So before I announce the winner, I'd first like to give an honorable mention to Shukan Bunshun, which I'm sure you all know is a weekly magazine that's been behind a series of pretty explosive scoops on subjects that the mainstream media dare not touch. And those include subjects related to the Olympics and to the Suga administration. I'd also like to pay tribute to the work of Voice Up Japan and its founder, Kazuna Yamamoto. They've given prominence to 2 issues, anti-discrimination and sexual consent, that have long been overlooked by Japan's mainstream media. And that brings us to our winner. Saori Ibuki, a news reporter at BuzzFeed Japan, has shown real dedication to a critically important issue, but it's one that media organizations fail to report in a way that exposes the human cost of discrimination towards members of Japan's LGBTQ community. In her writing on the many challenges facing LGBTQ people in Japan, where same-sex marriage is still has not been legalized, Ibuki-san approaches her subject with a compassion and a determination that I think we can all learn from. In a series of really moving articles that were published in November and December last year, she wrote about the suicide of a 25-year-old student at Hitotsubashi University who'd been outed against his will. Her interest in this story didn't just end there. She followed up, writing articles about his family's fight for compensation and their desire for Japan to become a place where, in their words, he would have felt happy to live. Now, we're holding these awards just a few weeks after the Liberal Democratic Party failed to submit a bill on LGBTQ rights during the most recent session of the National Diet. And not only that, during party discussions on this subject, several LDP politicians were reported to have made discriminatory remarks about sexual minorities. And all this just as Tokyo is preparing to host the Summer Olympics, the so-called Diversity Olympics. So it's against that backdrop that Ibuki-san's work is a timely reminder, I think, of why her brand of journalism is so necessary in Japan. So Ibuki-san, and I believe that you are at the FCCJ this evening. On behalf of all of us, and particularly the Freedom of the Press Committee, congratulations on this thoroughly deserved award. I hope we'll all be able to celebrate properly before too long. But in the meantime, please accept this award with our thanks and best wishes. And most of all, please keep up your terrific work. Thank you.
Could you actually just come over here and I'll present you with the trophy. To get this on the cameras. So, congratulations. Hold it like that and make sure the
Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
We'd also like to, actually, you probably can't carry this, or do you want to present you with a 1-year honorary membership of the club.
Thank you.
And we hope you will come and join us when we're able to open up a bit more after the pandemic.
Arigatou gozaimasu.
If we could just ask you to say a few words at the podium. Thank you very much, Eddie.
Thank you again so much for the introduction, and I am absolutely honored and grateful to be receiving such an amazing award as the Freedom of the Press Award Japan. And I would really like to thank the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan and also for seeing value in my work. And I would also like to congratulate the journalists of Myanmar as women, and my heart goes out to the hardship that you have to go through in the battle, and I really would like to cheer and give my best wishes to you all. Thank you. And I used to be a student member of this club, and I used to pop in and out of the press conferences as an aspiring student. And that is a rare opportunity in a Kishakurabu culture that Japan has in its journalism industry. So this is really a full circle moment for me. Thank you so much. I started my career as a news reporter at Asahi Shimbun in 2015 and moved to BuzzFeed 4 years ago. And I have always wanted to work as a journalist because one, it seemed absolutely exciting and fun. And two, to me, it seemed that journalists were the people who created change in society. And maybe because I was a girl who lived up in a country where everything was decided by elderly men, or maybe because I had a disabled brother, I really craved for many changes in Japan. And as I'm now in 6 or 7 years in my career, and I feel more strongly that journalists play a very important role to drive change in society. But I also learned that every single change comes from that one voice, who the person who have suffered, but still is willing to voice their stories for the sake of others. And as Mr. McCurry already mentioned, the LDP failed to pass the legislation that mentioned discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender is not allowed this month. And their MP also made a very hateful comment about LGBTQ community, which was widely criticized. And LGBTQ rights has been a very important issue for me. And the first story I did about LGBTQ rights was actually a homework assignment back in high school, which I interviewed my friend from middle school who is transgender. And I actually don't remember what the assignment was, but I interviewed him, and he told me how he felt disconnected with his own body, how he felt discomfort of being forced to wear school uniforms that were skirts, that were gender stereotyped. And he also told me that he was very frightened that people may find out who he really was. So the discrimination and violation of human rights of LGBTQ people have always been visible and tangible and hurting to me. And in the past few years, I've met with so many people who, as I mentioned, were hurt, but still hoping to make change and willing to share their stories. Mr. G, a gay man from Taiwan, had been overstaying his visa for 22 years just because he couldn't get married with his gay partner and get a spouse visa. One of the plaintiffs, Ikuo Sato, who filed a lawsuit against Japan for marriage equality, just passed away this January before being able to marry his lifelong partner. And Shiho Shimoyamada, one of the very few open athletes in Japan, is non-binary and lives with her female partner. And she told me that she had always been afraid of herself because she just couldn't be what normal was supposed to be. And as Justin mentioned, the death of a 25-year-old Hitotsubashi University Law School student who had been outed against his will, his story was also very something that I hold very close to my heart, because he was only a year older than myself, and his younger sister is the same age as myself. And she told me how she was torn, how she was hurt and didn't know what to do with the loss of her brother, but she still decided to go through the lawsuit because she wanted to see a world where her brother could have lived. And every story has empowered me and has given me the drive to keep going. And every story is irreplaceable, but I think that one common thing that everybody says is that they don't want the younger generation to experience the same thing that they had to in Japan. So change is necessary. It is urgent. The issue is very critical. And I think we have so much more work to do as journalists who work in Japan. So I can't thank enough to everyone who has, I don't know, contributed to this award. And thank you for also everyone who shared their stories with me. And I just hope that I can be an ally and a supporting hand to actually make changes happen. And I think for now, that is my only job. So thank you so much. ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much indeed, Ibuki.
ありがとうございます。
Okay, with that, we're reaching the end of the ceremony. So if I could ask Ilgun Yorulmaz, who's the board liaison for the Freedom of the Press Committee, to make the closing remarks. Thank you, Ilgun.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I hope you can see me and hear me well. My name is Ilgin Yorulmaz, and I'm a reporter for BBC World Turkish from Istanbul, based in Tokyo, but I'm talking to you tonight from Turkey. As the secretary of this year's FCCJ board and the board liaison for the Freedom of the Press Committee, I salute this year's award winners for their courage and resilience. I would also like to express my honor for being given the chance to say a few closing remarks. The press exists in every regime in the world, but a free press exists only in democratic regimes. So each of the winners tonight has had to endure threats and horrific violence, not only verbal, but also physical at the hands of the authorities, like Sue, who had just recounted earlier in his remarks, which I'm sure left all of us speechless. Violence and intimidation of any kind against journalists or merely trying to do their job to inform the public as part of their fourth estate function can never be accepted and can never be normalized. Apart from myself, we have several new, current, and ex-members on the FCCJ board who come from countries such as Syria, Iran, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. So we are well aware that the maltreatment of journalism, not just from these countries, but anywhere now, is meant to suffocate democracy. A couple of days ago, a well-known Agence France Presse photojournalist from my home country, Turkey, a Turkish journalist, was subjected to such maltreatment. Bülent Kılınç was covering the LGBTQ Pride Walk in Istanbul that was banned by the authorities, and the police surrounded him, threw him on the ground, and pressed on his back and his throat, dismissing his cries, "I can't breathe." It was only when a bystander intervened and Kılınç was taken to the police station and it was found out that he was a journalist just doing his job. "I can't breathe" is an eerily familiar, I'm sure, from victims like George Floyd of disproportionate police brutality in America most recently. But these days, it seems journalists all over the world have no immunity from such brutality. There is no question about it. When the press suffocates, the public does too. Now, press clubs all over Turkey have protested this incident, but these days, like I said, similar scenarios are being played out in every corner of the world, perhaps except a couple of most democratic Scandinavian countries. The recent demise of the Apple Daily that Isabel mentioned in Hong Kong has shown they can intimidate independent media organizations, and likewise, pro-government media bosses can easily lay off dissident journalists without benefits and rights, like it happened in Turkey. From Turkey to Myanmar to Japan and the US, the press is being coerced to hide the truth. Now, we are going through a lethal pandemic, economic and physical insecurity, and violent conflict. And according to Freedom House 2021 Democracy Index, democracy's defenders, like the journalists, sustained heavy new losses in their struggle against these authoritarian foes, and it shifted the balance in favor of tyranny. Reporters Without Borders, that some of us mentioned tonight, defines journalism as the vaccine against disinformation. Now, sure enough, public trust in media in every country, which was in a downward spiral, let's face it, before the COVID pandemic hit, is up again thanks to the need to get accurate information about the pandemic, the treatment, the vaccines. But yet, journalism is completely or partly blocked, according to Reporters Without Borders, in 73% of the 180 countries in the world that the organization monitors. Myanmar ranks 140th in that ranking out of 180 countries. Of course, we know that the coup d'etat of February 2021 set Myanmar's journalists back 10 years, at least 10 years. Most of the independent media outlets, such as Open Magazine, Myanmar Now, that we heard from tonight, DVB, Mizima, and BBC Burmese, face systematic arrest campaigns and censorship. So it is therefore fitting that at FCCJ we recognize the promising journalism shown by the Myanmar journalists as a whole, and I thank Swewin of Myanmar Now for that. As for Japan, like Isabel mentioned, although the country is ranked relatively high, maybe 67th out of 180 countries, journalists still find it hard to fulfill their role as the democracy is watchdog because of a lack of diversity and the influence of tradition and business interests. Furthermore, the system of Kisha Club system, which I personally am not in favor of, continues to discriminate against freelancers and foreign reporters. And there's a lack of understanding and awareness of what I would call the undercurrents or the minority in Japanese society, which perhaps only a free press can cover and unearth. As was the case with Turkey, where the Pride Walk was canceled, there's an open hostility by most of the misogynistic Japanese lawmakers against the LGBTQ in Japan. So this makes BuzzFeed Japan's Saori Ibuki's win as a woman journalist reporting on LGBTQ issues, among others, all the more in my humble opinion. As the co-chair of FCCJ's Diversity Committee, I would love to see Ibuki-san among our ranks and what events with her to help Japan diversify. Dear journalists, congratulations once again for winning this award. Please keep writing as it matters, because if you do, it will matter, and we can all take in a deep breath of fresh air. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Ilgen. Well, with that, we end the ceremony today. So thank you very much to everybody who took part, and congratulations again to the winners. I hope you continue to go on to great things. Thank you very much.